At 22, Gen Z doesn't feel young. They don't feel reckless. They don't feel curious about life the way previous generations did. They feel exhausted. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. Not the kind of tired that comes from hard work. This is a deeper fatigue. A psychological heaviness. A quiet sense that life already asked too much, too early. At the same age, boomers felt like the world was opening. Mistakes felt temporary. The future felt forgiving. Gen Z looks at the same future and feels pressure instead of possibility. They talk about burnout before they have even started careers. They joke about death before they've fully lived. They feel emotionally old before adulthood even begins. And this raises a disturbing question. How does a generation become psychologically aged before time has a chance to touch them? This is not about weakness. This is not about entitlement. And this is definitely not about laziness. This is about what happens when a human mind is raised inside constant pressure, constant comparison, and constant uncertainty. This is the psychology of Gen Z aging too fast. We are taught to measure age in years. Psychology measures age differently. Age is not how long you've lived. Age is how long your nervous system has been under stress. A person who lives calmly for 10 years will feel younger than someone who spends 2 years in survival mode. Your brain doesn't count birthdays. It counts tension, alertness, anxiety, threat. Boomers grew up in a slower psychological environment. Life unfolded gradually. Gen Z did not grow up gradually. They grew up compressed. Their nervous systems were exposed to adult-level stress while still developing. And when a developing nervous system is overstimulated for too long, it adapts, but not in a healthy way. It becomes hypervigilant, over-analytical, emotionally guarded. These are not traits of youth. These are traits of psychological aging. Boomers had something Gen Z never experienced: the freedom to be unaware. Ignorance in childhood is not stupidity, it is protection. Boomers didn't know about global collapse. They didn't know about climate anxiety. They didn't know about economic instability at age 10. Their worries were small, and that mattered. Gen Z never had small worries. Before finishing childhood, they were exposed to global crises, political chaos, mental health labels, economic fear. They were taught to analyze emotions before they learned how to feel safe. Psychology has a term for this: accelerated cognitive maturity without emotional containment. You understand everything early, but you're protected by nothing. That doesn't create wisdom. It creates mental weight, and carrying adult-level awareness in a child's nervous system forces the brain to grow defensive far too soon. Information is not neutral. Every piece of information adds psychological weight. Gen Z did not just grow up informed. They grew up overexposed. They learned early that systems collapse, institutions fail, authority lies, stability is temporary. When uncertainty becomes permanent, the brain adapts by lowering expectations. Hope becomes dangerous. Optimism becomes embarrassing. Trust feels naive. This is why Gen Z often sounds cynical even when they're young. It's not arrogance, it's self-protection. An old mind doesn't dream loudly, it stays alert. Boomers compared themselves to neighbors. Gen Z compares themselves to millions of people, constantly. Social media did something no generation experienced before. It turned identity into a performance. From a young age, Gen Z learned to curate themselves, monitor reactions, track validation. When your sense of worth is constantly evaluated, the brain never rests. Youth requires psychological safety. Constant comparison destroys it. Feeling watched ages the mind. Gen Z is the first generation raised inside infinite stimulation. Scrolling never ends. Content never stops. Validation is always available. Dopamine, the chemical of motivation, was designed for scarcity. Gen Z received it in excess. When dopamine becomes constant, it loses meaning. This creates a dangerous state. High stimulation, low fulfillment. That's why Gen Z feels bored while overstimulated. Why nothing feels exciting for long. Why rest feels empty instead of refreshing. This is not laziness. This is dopamine exhaustion. And a burnt reward system feels old, even in a young body. Boomers entered adulthood during expansion. They believed effort would be rewarded. Gen Z entered adulthood during instability. Every decision feels permanent. Every mistake feels fatal. Every delay feels like falling behind forever. At 22, boomers experimented. At 22, Gen Z calculates. When the brain is forced to calculate constantly, it enters survival mode. Survival mode does not feel young. It feels tense, controlled, heavy. You don't dream in survival mode. You brace. Gen Z is emotionally aware. They understand trauma, boundaries, mental health. But awareness without rest becomes burden. They are expected to heal themselves, heal their families, fix society. That is too much emotional responsibility for an unfinished identity. When emotional labor starts too early, it doesn't empower. It exhausts. This is why Gen Z humor is dark. Why irony replaces sincerity. Why optimism feels risky. Hope requires energy. And Gen Z is already tired. Here is the psychological truth. Feeling old is protection. If you believe you've already seen everything, disappointment hurts less. Lower expectations mean fewer emotional injuries. Gen Z does not feel old because they lived more. They feel old because they learned too early that the world does not protect you, so their minds adapted. Gen Z is not broken. They are overloaded. They didn't age faster by choice. They age faster because the world accelerated around them. Feeling old at 22 is not a failure. It is a signal. A signal that the human mind was never designed to grow up inside constant pressure, infinite stimulation, and permanent uncertainty. So maybe the real question is not, what's wrong with Gen Z? But, what kind of world makes youth feel ancient? If this video made you uncomfortable, that's intentional. Psychora isn't here to motivate you, it's here to understand you. We explore the psychology behind modern minds, silent struggles, and the thoughts people don't say out loud. If you want to see the world and yourself more clearly, welcome to Psychora.